A child is forced to live in the barn while the father's mansion becomes forbidden territory under the orders of a cruel stepmother. There, among horses and cold, the child keeps a medallion as the only link to a past filled with affection. But there, silence begins to crumble when a caretaker decides to see what everyone pretends not to notice. What unfolds from that moment transforms not only the child's life, but also the very concept of justice in a world coated with social varnish. On the imposing Golden Ridge estate, one of the largest coffee properties in the Southern California countryside, little William Mendonca Torres, just 7 years old, learned to move like a shadow. The thin boy with dark hair and eyes that had once sparkled with childlike innocence now traversed the sprawling lawns of the property with silent steps, always alert to the slightest sign of movement in the windows of the main house. As the sun set behind the endless coffee plantations that had built the family's fortune, William hurried towards the old stone stable, at the opposite end of the impeccably manicured garden. It was there, among the animals, that the Coffee King's only son had slept for almost a year, ever since Deborah Miller, his father's new wife, had transformed the colonial mansion into forbidden territory for him. Augustus Torres, a respected businessman and heir to one of the largest fortunes in American agribusiness, was rarely present. International trips, meetings in Los Angeles, and commitments with investors consumed his time and attention. When questioned about his son's estrangement, he repeated the convenient explanation Deborah had provided him. "The boy prefers to be alone. You know how he's been since Cecilia left us." Cecilia, Augustus's first wife and William's mother, had passed away 2 years prior after a prolonged illness. Her last gesture was to give her son a silver medallion with the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, a family relic that now remained hidden under a loose floorboard in the stable, the boy's only link to a past of affection and protection. "Bless you, Star," William whispered as he entered the stable, stroking the chestnut mare that occupied the first stall. The animal neighed softly, as if understanding the daily ritual. At the back of the stable, behind an improvised partition, was the boy's room, an old mattress covered by faded sheets, some clothes folded on a wooden crate, and a small battery-powered flashlight, a secret gift from Mrs. Josie, the cook who occasionally managed to sneak some food to him. William sat on the mattress, feeling the cold that was beginning to intensify with the arrival of dusk. Autumn in Riverside could be inclement, with cold nights contrasting with warm days. He had learned to sleep in his day clothes, curled up under thin blankets, often waking with lips chapped by the cold and dehydration. A few yards away, the halls of the Golden Ridge Estate's main house glowed with perfect lighting, ambient music, and the discreet clinking of crystal glasses. Deborah hosted important figures from Los Angeles society for yet another of her frequent charity events. Known as the Angel of Charity in social magazine reports, she presided over the Torres Foundation for Childhood Support, an institution that, ironically, declared its mission to ensure dignity and a future for vulnerable children. "My husband deeply regrets not being present," Deborah explained with a rehearsed smile to the guests, adjusting the emerald necklace around her elegant neck. "Augustus is in Geneva, finalizing a partnership that will multiply our capacity to serve needy children in the Coffee Valley." No one in that room questioned the absence of the young heir. The official explanation, repeated discreetly, in whispers, was that the boy was still suffering from emotional problems after the loss of his mother, and that specialists recommended a period of seclusion. The truth, however, was quite different. "I don't want that child appearing during the event," Deborah had instructed the staff hours earlier. "If anyone sees him, tell him he must stay in the stable. No food from the party, understood? He messes everything up, scares the guests, and ruins my image. Augustus doesn't need to know these details." In the stable, William rummaged through a plastic bag containing the employees' lunch leftovers, a piece of bread, cold rice and beans that Mrs. Josie had managed to hide for him. As the cook had already warned, it wasn't healthy for a growing boy, but it was better than going hungry. Among the animals, the boy found the only comfort available. The estate's horses, the same ones his father proudly displayed in competitions, offered warmth on cold nights and a living presence that alleviated his loneliness. Ironically, Augustus Torres's thoroughbreds received regular veterinary care, balanced diets and clean stables, while his only son languished in the same space, invisible to all except Deborah's vigilant eyes. Joachim Foster, the estate's oldest caretaker, had been observing the situation for weeks with growing uneasiness. An employee of the Torres family for over 20 years, he had witnessed William's birth and watched him grow into a happy and healthy boy during the years Cecilia was alive. The transformation after Deborah's arrival was frightening. The boy had visibly lost weight. His clothes, always the same, were torn in several places, and his feet, often bare, showed untreated wounds. "The boy isn't well." "Mrs. Josie," Joachim commented to the cook as they both watched William from afar walking towards the stable, dodging behind the trees to avoid being seen by arriving guests. "This isn't right. The boss needs to know." "And who will tell him, Joachim?" the lady replied, nervously adjusting her apron. "Mrs. Deborah has the boss wrapped around her finger. She's already fired 3 employees just for talking about the boy. We have our own families to support." The moral dilemma consumed Joachim. Each night that passed, as he returned to his simple home at the back of the property, the weight of his omission became harder to bear. On that particular night, seeing the contrast between the ostentatious luxury of the charity event and William's plight, something broke inside the old employee. "I'll sort this out tomorrow," he decided, looking once more towards the stable before retiring. "May God forgive me if I'm wrong, but I can no longer pretend I don't see." In the stable, wrapped in thin blankets, William held the silver medallion against his chest and whispered a prayer his mother had taught him. His closed eyes tried to conjure the increasingly distant image of Cecilia, her gentle smile, the soft hands that caressed his hair before he slept. "Good night, Mom," the boy murmured as a solitary tear escaped the corner of his eye. Outside, the cold autumn wind of Southern California whistled through the cracks in the old wood, while in the main house, glasses clinked in celebration of the generosity of a woman who, a few yards away, had condemned a child to invisibility. Morning arrived with the characteristic aroma of fresh coffee lingering over the Golden Ridge estate. Workers were already moving among the coffee plants, while in the main house, staff collected the last traces of the previous night's charity party. Joachim Foster woke with the weight of the decision he had made. At 62, after a lifetime of honest work, he had never imagined facing such a profound dilemma. Sitting at the simple table in his home at the back of the property, the caretaker contemplated his cup of black coffee, while his wife, Teresa, prepared a simple breakfast. "You didn't sleep well." "Hell, man," she observed, placing a plate of cornbread on the table. "It's the boy, isn't it?" Joachim nodded silently. Teresa knew her husband well enough to know that, when he was like this, an important decision had already been made. "I'm going to the Family Services Agency today," he finally said, his voice hoarse from carrying a heavy burden. "I can't watch what they're doing to the boss's son and stay silent anymore." Teresa sat beside him and held his calloused hand. "Are you sure, Joachim? We could lose everything. And what good is our job if we lose our soul, woman?" he replied, standing up. "I remember the day the boy was born. Mr. Augustus almost knocked down our door with happiness, bringing cigars for everyone. Mrs. Cecilia, God rest her soul, entrusted the boy's baptism to us as godparents. What kind of godparent would I be if I abandoned my godson now?" In the city of Riverside, 30 miles from the estate, the Family Services Agency operated in a modest building near the center. Joachim adjusted the clean shirt he had set aside for the occasion, took a deep breath and entered, feeling out of place and nervous. "Good morning, how can I help you?" asked the receptionist, a young woman with a tired expression typing on an old computer. I need to talk about a child," Joachim began, twisting his hat in his hands. "It's serious, very serious." Minutes later, in a small room with posters about the Child and Adolescent Protection Act on the walls, Joachim was received by Raphael Carter, one of the region's most experienced child protection officers. A man in his 40s, with prematurely graying hair and attentive eyes. Raphael had handled hundreds of cases over 15 years of service. "You can speak without fear. Mr. Foster, everything you say here is protected by confidentiality," Raphael assured. Noticing the man's evident nervousness, Joachim started hesitantly, but soon the words poured out like dammed water. He spoke about William, about the conditions in the stable, about the stepmother who maintained a facade foundation while neglecting her stepson. He described the torn clothes, the injured feet, the increasing thinness, the forced isolation. And the child's father? Mr. Augustus Torres? Raphael asked, taking detailed notes. The boss is almost never at the estate. He travels a lot, is away for weeks. His wife, Mrs. Deborah, convinced him that the boy prefers to be alone, that it's a behavioral problem after his mother passed away. And do you have any proof of these situations you are describing? Joachim hesitated for a moment before pulling an old cell phone from his pocket. I'm not good with these technologies, but my grandson taught me. I have some photos I took without anyone noticing, of the place where the boy sleeps, of his condition. Raphael examined the images with a grave expression. Even in the poor quality photographs, the shocking contrast between the luxury of the property and the conditions in which the boy lived was visible. One image showed William sleeping curled up under thin blankets on the stable floor, his face marked by dried tears. Another revealed wounds on the boy's feet as he walked barefoot around the estate grounds. Mr. Foster, what you are doing is an act of courage and citizenship, Raphael said, placing the cell phone in an official folder. I will immediately activate the protection network. This will involve specialized child and family services, the district attorney's office, and a multidisciplinary team. What will happen to the boy? And to me? Joachim asked, the reality of the consequences finally setting in. As for the boy, our priority is to ensure his immediate safety and well-being. As for you, the law guarantees protection for whistleblowers, but I won't lie. In cases involving powerful people, there are always risks. Joachim nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Do whatever is necessary. I just don't want the boy to keep suffering. Upon leaving the Family Services Agency, Joachim felt a weight of years being lifted from his shoulders, even knowing that difficult days lay ahead. On his way back to the estate, he passed St. Benedict's Church, where William had been baptized 7 years earlier. He entered, lit a candle, and prayed for the first time in many years. That same morning, the complaint had been urgently forwarded to Marina Adams, a social worker at the Specialized Child and Family Services, SSR. With extensive experience in cases of child abuse, Marina reviewed the photographs, read the detailed testimony, and conducted a quick search on the Torres family. The father is a well-known figure in agribusiness, she commented to her colleague Lucy. The stepmother constantly appears in social columns because of her philanthropic work. Precisely the most difficult cases, Lucy replied. Rich, influential family with an impeccable public image. It will require care, Marina. I'll request the Children's Division of the District Attorney's Office to monitor from the start, Marina decided, picking up the phone. Cases like this tend to get complicated quickly when the press finds out. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set over the coffee plantations, Joachim returned to his usual work on the estate, trying to act naturally. From afar, he saw William sneaking out of the staff area, probably after getting some food from Mrs. Josie. The boy moved like a frightened animal, always attentive, always alert. The caretaker felt a lump in his throat when he noticed Deborah watching her stepson from the veranda, with a barely disguised expression of displeasure. She said something to one of the security guards, who immediately approached the boy. Even from a distance, Joachim could see the fear in William's eyes when the burly man addressed him. Mrs. Deborah said you should go back to the stable, the guard said loud enough for Joachim to hear. And she said if she catches you near the house again during the state secretary's visit, you'll be in trouble. The boy lowered his head and turned towards the stable without a word. His shuffling steps and slumped shoulders were the living image of defeat. Joachim looked away, unable to keep watching. Hold on, my boy, he thought. Help is on the way. The next morning, Joachim was woken by firm knocks on his door. Teresa, still in her nightgown, opened it with an apprehensive expression, to find Marina Adams and Raphael Carter, accompanied by a prosecutor and 2 police officers. Mr. Joachim Foster, Marina asked, presenting her identification. I'm Marina Adams, a social worker from Specialized Child and Family Services. This is Dr. Claudia Rivers, a prosecutor from the Juvenile and Family Court. We need your help for a technical visit to the main residence. Joachim looked at his wife, who nodded discreetly. "Yes, ma'am. Just let me change my clothes." As he dressed, the caretaker could hear the start of movement on the estate. Through the window, he saw the official entourage approach the main gates, causing evident agitation among the staff. Someone ran towards the main house, surely to warn Deborah of the unexpected arrival. "It's done," Joachim thought, with a mixture of fear and resolve. May God protect the boy now. And as he walked to meet the team, he saw in the distance the small figure of William watching everything from the half-open stable door, his frightened eyes fixed on the official cars, unaware that that moment would forever change the course of his young life. The autumn sun illuminated the impeccable gardens of the Golden Ridge estate as the official delegation crossed the main gate. At the center of the property, the colonial main house displayed its preserved 19th century architecture, surrounded by imperial palm trees that traced a perfect line to the main entrance. To the unsuspecting eye, it was a portrait of well-managed opulence, a postcard of thriving rural America. Marina Adams had seen this scenario many times during her 15 years as a social worker. Impeccable mansions that hid dark secrets, seemingly perfect families whose closed doors guarded stories of abuse and neglect. She knew that the higher the wall, the more complex the protection work would be. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Deborah Miller's voice sounded melodious as she descended the veranda steps, wearing an elegant dress that seemed too casual for that time of morning. Her calculated smile faltered slightly as she noticed the official badges and Joachim's presence with the delegation. "Mrs. Miller, I'm Marina Adams, a social worker from Specialized Child and Family Services. This is Dr. Claudia Rivers, a prosecutor from the Juvenile and Family Court. We are here for a technical visit in response to a formal complaint." Deborah's smile froze for a fraction of a second, but she quickly regained her composure. "Complaint? There must be some mistake. The Torres Foundation follows all transparency protocols in our charitable activities. We are not here to talk about the foundation. Mrs. Miller," Dr. Claudia clarified with the professional firmness of someone who had faced similar situations before, "the visit concerns the minor William Mendonca Torres, your stepson." A shadow crossed Deborah's face, but she maintained her social smile. "William, oh, I see. The boy has been going through a difficult period since he lost his mother. We've consulted specialists, you know. Complex behavioral problems. We would like to speak with him," Marina said, carefully observing the woman's reactions. "And we need to verify the conditions in which he is living, as provided for in the Child and Adolescent Protection Act." Of course," Deborah replied, opening the door wider. "Please come in. I'll ask someone to call William. He usually wanders around the property. It's part of what doctors call grief processing. Perhaps we can have some coffee while we wait." The strategy was evident: excessive hospitality, pleasant conversation, an attempt to control the environment and time. Marina exchanged a meaningful look with Raphael, who understood immediately. "If you'll allow me," Raphael intervened, "while you speak with Dr. Claudia," the social worker, "and I would like to begin evaluating the property's conditions. Mr. Foster has kindly offered to show us the places the boy frequents." The tension appeared as a small crack in Deborah's perfect smile. "Wouldn't it be better to wait for my husband? Augustus is in Los Angeles, but I can try to contact him. He would be more comfortable if he were present during such an inspection." Legislation does not require the presence of guardians during the initial technical assessment. "Mrs. Miller," Dr. Claudia explained firmly, "and the urgency of the complaint requires immediate procedures." As Deborah led the prosecutor into the luxurious interior of the house, Marina, Raphael, and the police officers accompanied Joachim towards the stable. The caretaker walked with his head down, clearly nervous about his now exposed position as a whistleblower. "He usually stays here," Joachim explained in a low voice as they approached the stable. Ever since the stepmother arrived, the boy was gradually moved away from the main house. First they said it was temporary, then it became permanent. The stable was a solid, well-maintained building designed to house the estate's valuable competition horses. Marina immediately noticed the contrast. The animal stalls were spacious, clean, with ventilation and temperature control systems. At the back, however, behind an improvised partition, they found the space where William lived. "My God," Raphael whispered, seeing the thin mattress on the cement floor, the few belongings organized in crates, the lack of any basic comfort or dignity. Marina took a deep breath, controlling her professional indignation so as not to compromise her technical objectivity. With precise gestures, she began to photograph everything: the inadequate space, the absence of appropriate sanitary facilities, the precarious hygiene conditions, the total lack of thermal insulation against the cold which, on autumn and winter nights, could be severe in the region. "Where is the boy now?" she asked the caretaker. "I'm not sure. When he saw the cars arriving, he must have hidden. He always does that when visitors come. Mrs. Deborah forbids him to appear during events or important visits." At that moment, one of the police officers drew the group's attention to a movement among the nearby trees. Marina approached with cautious steps and saw, partially hidden behind a trunk, little William. Even from a distance, the social worker could notice the alarming signs: extreme thinness, clothes inadequate for the season, bare and injured feet. "Hello, William," Marina called softly, maintaining a respectful distance. "My name is Marina. I'm here to talk to you. Can I come closer?" The boy didn't answer, but he also didn't run away, his large dark eyes observing the stranger with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Marina advanced slowly until she was close enough to see what her years of experience had already identified as classic signs of severe neglect: chapped lips from dehydration, skin patches consistent with prolonged exposure to cold, hair without a cut or basic care. "You don't need to be afraid," Marina continued, crouching down to be at the boy's eye level. "We're here because we care about you, to make sure you're okay." William blinked a few times as if that were a difficult idea to process. "Do you know Aunt Deborah?" he finally asked, his voice almost inaudible. "Yes, I just met her, but I came especially to talk to you." The boy looked quickly at the main house, then at the stable, a silent calculation of risks. "She'll be mad if she sees me talking to you." Marina felt her stomach clench with that simple sentence that confirmed so much. "No one will be mad at you today, William. I promise. Can we talk for a bit?" After a few moments of hesitation, the boy nodded shyly. Marina guided the conversation with the care of someone crossing a minefield, using appropriate techniques for interviewing children in vulnerable situations. Gradually, fragments of William's daily routine emerged: waking before dawn to use the outdoor bathroom unseen, collecting food scraps when possible, hiding during events, sleeping among the animals for warmth on cold nights. "Can I see where you keep your special things?" Marina asked after gaining a minimum of trust. William hesitated, but eventually led her back to the stable. Kneeling near the mattress, he removed a loose floorboard and pulled out a slightly oxidized silver medallion. "It was my mom's," he explained simply, holding the object as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. "I have to hide it because Aunt Deborah said she would throw it away." Marina discreetly documented the moment, while Raphael, a few steps behind, made detailed notes. The complete picture that emerged was devastating. A child deliberately removed from family life, deprived of basic hygiene, food and comfort while in the main house. Charity events were held in the name of child protection. "William, have you been feeling unwell lately? Aches, coughs, fever?" Marina asked, noticing the skin patches and the boy's slightly labored breathing. "Sometimes it's hard to breathe at night," he admitted, "and my feet hurt when it's very cold." The decision was made at that moment. Marina exchanged a look with Raphael, and the silent message was clear. There were no conditions to leave that child for another day in that situation. She quickly typed a message to Dr. Claudia, who was still talking with Deborah in the main house. On the veranda of the main house, the prosecutor received the message and abruptly ended the pleasant conversation Deborah was trying to maintain about the Foundation's social projects. "Mrs. Miller," Dr. Claudia said with formal firmness, "based on the preliminary technical assessment, we are temporarily removing the minor William Mendonca Torres from the residence for immediate medical evaluation and emergency institutional care, as provided for in Articles 98 and 101 of the Child and Adolescent Protection Act." Deborah's mask of cordiality completely collapsed. "This is absurd. You can't just come onto my property and take the boy. I'm calling my lawyer right now. You have every right to engage your legal defense." the prosecutor replied with professional coolness, but the protective measure is already in effect. A hearing will be scheduled in the coming days where you and your husband can present your case before the Juvenile and Family Court. Deborah watched, livid with rage, as the delegation gathered again near the vehicles. Marina gently guided William, who carried only a small bundle with his few clothes and the silver medallion firmly in his hand. "This won't stand," Deborah shouted from the veranda. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Augustus will not allow this invasion of privacy." Marina helped William into the official vehicle, shielding him from his stepmother's biting words. The boy seemed simultaneously frightened and relieved, clinging to the medallion like a lifeline in a stormy sea. "Where are we going?" he asked in a low voice as the car began to move along the long avenue of imperial palm trees. "To a safe place," Marina replied, gently placing a blanket over the boy's narrow shoulders. "A place where you'll have a warm bed, food on the table, and people who will care for you." As the vehicle left the property, Joachim watched the scene from the stable entrance, silent tears streaming down his wrinkled face. The price of his complaint would be high, probably his decades-long job and the house where he lived with his wife. But seeing little William finally receiving the protection he deserved, the old caretaker knew he had made the only possible choice. "Go with God, my son," he whispered, as the car disappeared down the dirt road that cut through the coffee plantations. "May your life truly begin today." Riverside Regional Hospital buzzed with the typical activity of a Thursday afternoon when the Family Services Agency team arrived with William. The boy, huddled in the back seat of the official car, watched with frightened eyes the movement of people in white coats entering and leaving the large building. "Do I have to get a shot?" he asked in a low voice, holding Marina's hand tightly. The social worker smiled gently. "Don't worry, we're just going to talk to a very nice doctor who will check how you are. Nothing will happen without me explaining it to you first, okay?" In the pediatric ward, they had already been alerted about the case. Dr. Renata Franklin, a physician specializing in cases of child and adolescent abuse, waited in a room specially prepared to receive vulnerable patients, a colorful environment, toys available, and a less intimidating approach than traditional doctors' offices. "Hello, William? I'm Dr. Renata," she introduced herself with a warm smile, immediately noticing the signs her trained eye identified: accentuated thinness, pallor, defensive posture, small, untreated lesions. "Do you like to draw? I have some colored pencils here while we talk." The physical examination, conducted with extreme care and always explaining each step, confirmed what his appearance already suggested: moderate malnutrition, multiple skin lesions from cold exposure, the onset of a respiratory condition, dehydration, and various small untreated wounds, especially on his feet. The doctor meticulously documented each finding, discreetly photographing the most significant evidence. "I'll need to do some blood tests," she explained to William. "You'll feel a quick prick, but I promise it will pass quickly." The boy nodded bravely but squeezed Marina's hand tightly during the collection. When it was all over, he was rewarded with a lollipop and a small teddy bear from the hospital's toy box. "Is it really for me?" he asked incredulously, touching the bear as if it were too precious to hold. "All yours," the doctor confirmed, feeling her chest tighten with that simple question that revealed so much. Outside the examination room, Dr. Renata spoke in a serious tone with Marina and Dr. Claudia. "The situation is severe. Malnutrition, anemia, onset of pneumonia, probable vitamin D deficiency due to lack of adequate sun exposure. The list is long. Not to mention the psychological aspects that will require specialized assessment." "Would hospitalization be necessary?" the prosecutor asked, already thinking about the legal implications. "Not immediately. With appropriate medication and monitoring, he can be treated on an outpatient basis, provided he is in a protected environment. The most urgent thing now is to ensure adequate nutrition, rest, warmth, and safety." With the medical report in hand, a document that would be a fundamental piece in the legal process, the team proceeded to the next step: emergency institutional care. The New Dawn Shelter Home, an institution partnered with the city for child protection cases, was located on a quiet street on the north side of the city. A spacious house adapted with shared rooms, a dining hall and activity room, and a multidisciplinary team to receive at-risk children, while definitive measures were judicially decided. Martha Gomez, a psychologist and coordinator of the home, personally received little William. With 20 years of experience in childcare, she knew that the first hours were crucial for establishing a bond of trust. "Welcome, William. This will be your home for a while," she said, showing him the room where he would stay. A simple but clean space, with 4 organized beds and an individual closet for each child. "You can choose which bed you prefer." The boy looked confused at the options, an unknown luxury after months of sleeping on a mattress on the stable floor. Hesitantly, he pointed to the bed near the window. "Great choice," Martha smiled. "Now how about a warm bath and clean clothes before dinner? We have some new clothes that should fit you." The ritual of the warm bath, something William hadn't experienced for months, was almost a revelation. The feeling of warm water, the lavender-scented soap, the soft towel, small comforts that seemed extraordinary after so much deprivation. Dressed in clean pajamas and soft socks, the boy looked different when he sat at the dining hall table for his first meal at the home. "Can I really eat all this?" he asked, looking at the plate served with rice, beans, vegetables, and a piece of chicken. "All yours," confirmed Lucy, the home's cook, who had seen that same question in the eyes of dozens of children over the years. "And there's dessert afterwards." That first night, Marina stayed late, helping with the initial adaptation. She observed with a mixture of sadness and hope how William carefully hid a piece of bread from dinner under his pillow. Typical behavior of children who had lived in food insecurity. "You don't need to save food, Will," she gently explained. "Here you will always have breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner. Every day." The boy nodded but kept the bread hidden anyway. He would need time to believe that meals were truly guaranteed. When it was time to sleep, Marina helped him settle into his chosen bed, covered him with a soft blanket, and watched as he firmly held the silver medallion against his chest. "I'll come back tomorrow to see how you are, okay?" she promised, adjusting the blanket. "And I'll bring your hospital bear that was left in the car." "Is Aunt Deborah coming to pick me up?" he asked, fear evident in his small voice. "No, William. You are safe here. No one will take you from this place unless it's to an even better one." When Marina finally left the shelter home, it was past midnight. In the car, she finally allowed herself to release the emotions she had kept under professional control all day. Silent tears streamed as she drove through the empty streets of the city. Her phone rang. It was Raphael, the child protection officer. "How is he?" asked the worried voice on the other end of the line. "Settled at New Dawn Home, physically exhausted, emotionally in shock but safe for the first time in a long time. Things have heated up here," Raphael informed. Augustus Torres rushed back from Los Angeles. He's already hired the Ullman and Bryant law firm, the most expensive in the city. They're threatening to sue everyone for trespassing and defamation. That was expected, Marina sighed. "And Joachim?" "Evicted immediately. He and his wife went to their daughter's house in Bakersfield. Torres sent security to accompany them while they removed their belongings. Public humiliation. A clear message to any other employee who thinks of speaking up." Marina felt a pang in her chest, thinking of the old caretaker who had risked everything to protect William. "We'll need protection for him as a witness. We're already arranging it. Dr. Claudia has involved the district attorney's office. And there's more. Rumors have emerged that the Torres Foundation has financial irregularities. Apparently, the philanthropy was more of an image operation and possible money laundering." Meanwhile, at New Dawn Shelter Home, William faced his first night away from the stable. The silent room, the soft bed, the absence of the familiar smell of horses. Everything was too strange. Lying in the dark, holding his mother's medallion, the boy tried to process the dizzying changes of that day. In a nearby bed, Peter, a 9-year-old boy who had been at the home for 2 weeks, noticed the newcomer's discomfort. "Hey, newbie," he called in a low voice. "Can't you sleep either?" William turned towards the voice, distinguishing only the outline of another boy in the dark. "I'm a little scared," he admitted. "Normal. My first night here was like that too. But it's cool, you know. Tomorrow there's art class, then soccer in the yard. And Aunt Lucy's food is the best in town. Can you have toys here?" William asked, remembering the teddy bear Marina had promised to bring. "Of course. There are tons in the game room. And on Sundays we can watch cartoons on the TV in the living room. Peter yawned, settling more comfortably in his bed. You'll see it's much better than out there. The simple conversation brought unexpected comfort. William felt his eyes grow heavy as he thought about his new friend's words. Maybe, just maybe, this strange new place was really safe. With the medallion firm between his fingers, he finally fell asleep. A peaceful sleep, protected by solid walls, a roof that didn't leak, and, for the first time in a long time, the absence of constant fear. The next morning, the sun streamed through the bedroom windows when William woke, momentarily confused about where he was. The sight of the clean bed, the soft blanket, and the other children beginning to get up brought back the memory of the previous day. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Martha called from the doorway. "Breakfast is already on the table. There's warm bread, milk, fruit, and even cornbread cake." The boy sat up in bed, smelling the fresh food, not leftovers or cold food, but a real meal prepared for him. As he timidly followed the other children to the dining hall, William began to understand that his life had completely changed. "Can I have seconds?" he asked after eagerly cleaning his plate. "As many times as you want," Lucy smiled, already serving another portion. "Children need to eat to grow strong." Meanwhile, a few miles away, the gears of justice and power began to move in opposite directions, in a battle that would define not only William's future, but possibly that of many other invisible children behind high walls and polished fortunes. The imposing building of the Allman and Bryant Law firm occupied the top 2 floors of a commercial tower in Riverside's financial district. With panoramic views of the city, imported furniture, and a contemporary art collection valued at millions, the space perfectly reflected the clientele it served: businessmen, politicians, and heirs willing to pay exorbitant fees to solve their problems. In the main meeting room, Augustus Torres waited impatiently, tapping his fingers on the mahogany table, while Richard Allman, a senior partner at the firm, reviewed documents. Beside Augustus, Deborah maintained perfect posture, although her eyes betrayed the tension she felt. "The situation is delicate, but manageable," Richard finally announced, adjusting his Italian-framed glasses. "We have several possible courses of action to reverse this absurd and excessive measure by the Family Services Agency." "I want my son back today," Augustus demanded, his voice laden with an authority accustomed to being obeyed without question. "And I want that caretaker prosecuted for defamation. 20 years working for my family, and this is how he repays loyalty." Richard exchanged a discreet look with his associate, Dr. Camilla Bryant. Both knew the situation was more complex than the client seemed willing to acknowledge. "Mr. Torres, we need to be strategic," Camilla explained carefully. "We have the preliminary medical report from the hospital, which documents concerning conditions. Attacking head-on now could be counterproductive." "What conditions?" "That kid has always been problematic," Deborah interrupted, nervously adjusting her pearl necklace. "Ever since his mother left, he refuses to follow rules, runs off to the stable of his own accord, rejects food." "Mrs. Miller," Richard intervened with professional firmness, "I need to be frank. The medical report indicates malnutrition, multiple untreated lesions, onset of pneumonia. We have photographs of where the boy slept, the caretaker's testimony, and most importantly, the child's own testimony. Her strategy of total denial would be disastrous in the current context." Augustus visibly paled. It was the first time he had heard concrete details about his son's condition. "It's not possible." "I never—" His voice trailed off as he looked at his wife with an expression of nascent disbelief. "Augustus, don't look at me like that," Deborah reacted quickly. "You know how difficult William is. We tried psychologists, we tried rules, we tried everything. He chose to isolate himself. And now they're treating us like criminals." The lawyer cleared his throat, interrupting the beginning of the marital argument. "Let's focus on the legal strategy. First, we need to adopt a collaborative stance with the justice system while controlling the public narrative. Second, we will request an independent psychological evaluation of the boy with a professional we trust. Third, prepare a specific counterattack on how the investigation was conducted, alleging procedural flaws." While the meeting continued in the luxurious office, in a modest room at the Riverside Courthouse, another strategy was being drawn up. Sitting at a simple table, with a mug of already cold coffee beside her, Dr. Felicity Oliver listened attentively to social worker Marina Adams's account. At 45, Felicity had left a promising career at a large firm to dedicate herself to social justice law, especially concerning children and adolescents. Her small office, maintained with her own resources and donations, was known for taking on cases no one else wanted and winning them. "They've already hired Ullman and Bryant," Marina explained. "They'll try to discredit the whole process, intimidate witnesses, maybe even buy people within the system." Felicity smiled with a tranquility that came from experience. "It wouldn't be the first time I've faced that firm. They have money and connections, but they don't always have the facts on their side." She carefully leafed through the dossier compiled by the Family Services Agency and specialized child and family services teams. "This case is solid. We have photographic documentation, a medical report, technical testimony. What we need now is to ensure that everything is properly preserved and presented. The media has already started circulating the case," added Raphael, the child protection officer. "The Terreses have a lot of influence. Some social columns are already insinuating that the boy has psychological problems and that the intervention was exaggerated." "That was expected," Felicity nodded, making notes in her pad. "We'll need a preliminary injunction for data protection to restrict media exposure of the case, preserving the child's identity. I also want an order for preservation of evidence for all security systems on the estate before they accidentally lose the recordings from the last few weeks." The strategies were clear. On one side, a powerful firm using its resources, connections, and intimidating tactics. On the other, a team committed to child protection, armed with technical evidence and determination. In the days that followed, the battle intensified on multiple fronts. The name of Joachim, the whistleblower caretaker, began to appear in local blogs with insinuations about disloyalty and envy. A mysterious internal investigation into misappropriation of funds during his period as an employee was announced by the Torres press office. The man who had dedicated decades of honest work to the family saw his reputation systematically attacked. Simultaneously, Deborah's image as a benefactress of needy children was reinforced in strategic publications. Photos of past charity events, testimonials from families assisted by the foundation, and even an exclusive interview in a national circulation magazine, Taiki, where she presented herself as a victim of unjustified persecution, were part of the image reconstruction strategy. "They're building a classic narrative," Felicity explained to the team, gathered in her office after another preliminary hearing. The dedicated and misunderstood stepmother, the busy but loving father, the envious caretaker, the problematic child, and us as the villains interfering in a structured family. Meanwhile, "William continues to have nightmares every night," commented Martha, the psychologist from the shelter home, who had joined the boys' rights defense team. "He drew this yesterday in therapy." She placed a colored pencil drawing on the table, the dark stable, horses in the stalls, and in a corner, a small figure huddled, with traces of tears on his face. At the top of the paper, written in uneven, childish handwriting, it read, "My room on the estate. I'm requesting judicial authorization to include these drawings as evidence," Felicity informed. "They are powerful graphic testimonies of the trauma experienced." The legal battle intensified when the Ullman and Bryant law firm filed a request for reconsideration of the protective measure, alleging procedural excesses and offering an alternative plan. William would return to the estate under the supervision of a private nurse, with periodic visits from professionals indicated by the firm itself. The juvenile and family court judge, Monica Thompson, known for her impartiality and technical rigor, denied the request. Immediate return to the environment where the alleged violations occurred represents a potential risk to the minor's physical and psychological integrity, she wrote in her dispatch, determining the maintenance of institutional care until the conclusion of investigations and a specific hearing. The Torres' response was immediate, a request for recusal against the judge, alleging manifest partiality, along with a formal complaint to the Court of Appeals. "It's part of the strategy," Felicity explained to the team, increasingly expanded with volunteer professionals sensitized by the case. They attacked the process to avoid discussing the merits. While contesting procedures and authorities, they gained time to build an alternative narrative and wear down witnesses. The turning point began to happen when a domestic worker from the estate, Josephine Smith, the Mrs. Josie who secretly fed William, decided to break her silence. Fired after the boy's removal, under the allegation of disobedience of direct orders, the cook sought the Family Services Agency to offer her testimony. Mrs. Deborah gave explicit orders not to feed the boy beyond what was strictly necessary, she revealed in an official testimony later included in the process. She said, "He needed to learn discipline, that he was too spoiled. When I tried to set aside a little more food, she would appear in the kitchen to check. Once she caught me saving a piece of cake and yelled that I was sabotaging his education." Mrs. Josie's detailed testimony, corroborating and expanding the information already provided by Joachim, represented a significant blow to the Torres defensive strategy. More importantly, she brought with her text messages she had received from Deborah, with explicit instructions on how to treat, or rather, ignore William. "I don't want the boy circulating around the house during Saturday's event. Keep him in the stable and make sure he doesn't show up." Or even, "William ate too much yesterday and was cheeky. Today only soup, nothing else." The messages, authenticated by technical expertise, were attached to the process along with financial statements that showed a revealing pattern. While thousands of dollars were spent monthly on designer clothes, luxury restaurants and aesthetic treatments, there was virtually no record of expenses related to William. No clothes, no school supplies, no toys. The basic school expenses were covered by an educational fund established by Cecilia, the biological mother, before she passed away, explained the forensic accountant hired by Felicity. Beyond that, there are no indications of expenses compatible with the adequate maintenance of a 7-year-old child. The situation became even more complicated for the Torreses when, following a judicial order, the recordings from the estate's security system were requested. Although several segments presented technical failures, coincidentally during the most relevant periods, the expert analysis managed to recover significant sequences. William leaving the stable at dawn to use the outdoor bathroom, scavenging for food scraps in trash cans, being visibly avoided by Deborah in occasional encounters in the gardens. In one of the most impactful recordings, partially recovered after deletion attempts, Deborah appeared in a conversation with 2 friends during a tea in the garden. "I can't stand that child around the house. He reminds me too much of his mother," she said, unaware she was being recorded. "Gustus barely notices, he's always traveling. And when he's here, I keep the boy away. It's better for the family's image, for the foundation, for everything. Augustus doesn't even suspect his son sleeps in the stable. He thinks it's a phase, that the boy prefers the horses." The recording, legally obtained through a judicial warrant, was admitted as evidence, despite vigorous protests from the Torres defense. The impact was devastating not only on the case, but on public opinion, which began to follow the case with growing interest. The press, initially favorable to the version of the exemplary family unjustly attacked, gradually changed its position when Louisa Martin, a respected investigative journalist, published a special report on the case. After weeks of rigorous investigation, interviews with multiple sources and document analysis, the article presented a complete dossier that systematically deconstructed the Torres public image. Facade philanthropy. The invisible child of the Coffee King revealed not only the details of the neglect against William, but also serious inconsistencies in the Torres Foundation's operations, including possible misappropriation of funds and announced projects that never materialized. The repercussions were immediate. Child rights organizations publicly spoke out. Sponsors began to withdraw support for the Torres Foundation. Invitations to social events were discreetly cancelled. The veneer of respectability that had cost so much effort to maintain on the Torres empire began to visibly crack. For Augustus, the hardest blow came when, after pressure from investors and business partners, he finally watched all the evidence gathered against his wife. The images of his son sleeping on the cold stable floor, the medical report detailing malnutrition and injuries, Deborah's recordings admitting that she deliberately kept the boy away, all of this shattered the carefully constructed narrative he had chosen to believe. The night before the decisive hearing, Augustus Torres confronted his wife in the study of his mansion, away from the ears of the staff. "How could you do this to my son?" he asked, his voice choked with contained emotion. "Why, Deborah, what could William, a 7-year-old child, have done to deserve such treatment?" Deborah, cornered by irrefutable evidence, abandoned the facade of the dedicated stepmother. "He was never my son, Augustus. He was a constant reminder of Cecilia, of how you never got over her death. I thought that with time, if he stayed far enough away, you would forget. Focus on our life, on our public image, on our projects." "Our public image," Augustus repeated, incredulous. "Is that what this is about? You condemned my son to live like an animal because of social appearances." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any answer. The next morning, Augustus Torres arrived alone at the courthouse for the decisive hearing. The battle on unequal fields was about to reach its moment of truth, with William's future hanging in the balance of justice. The Riverside courthouse was bustling that Monday morning. The Torres case hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m., but by 8 a.m. a small crowd had already formed at the main entrance. Journalists, curious onlookers, and child rights activists. The story of the stable boy, as William had come to be known, had captured public attention in a way no one had foreseen. In the room reserved for witnesses, Joachim Foster, nervously, adjusted his tie, a borrowed one rarely worn during his years as a caretaker. Beside him, Mrs. Josie held a rosary, moving her lips in silent prayers. Both knew they would face the power and influence of the Torreses, but the determination to protect William outweighed their fear. "Just tell the truth, Josie," Joachim advised in a low voice. "No more, no less. Only what you saw with your own eyes." In another room, Marina Adams reviewed her technical reports with Dr. Felicity Oliver. The two women had worked tirelessly in recent weeks, documenting every piece of evidence, preparing every argument, anticipating every move by the Torres defense. "They will try to discredit William's testimony," Felicity predicted. "They'll allege emotional instability, mental confusion, suggestibility. It's the standard tactic when they can't attack the facts." "We are prepared," Marina assured. Dr. Renata finished the supplementary report with the developmental assessment yesterday. "There's no room for doubt about what that boy went through." In the third reserved room, the most protected and distant from the activity, William waited with Martha Gomez, the psychologist from the shelter home. Dressed in new clothes, jeans, a plaid shirt and sneakers, the boy seemed simultaneously healthier and more apprehensive than on the day of his removal from the estate. 3 weeks of adequate nutrition, medical care, and a safe environment already showed visible results. Fuller cheeks, better skin color, healed wounds. "I'm scared to see Aunt Deborah," he confessed, clutching the silver medallion he never let go of. "What if she gets mad at me?" "Remember what we talked about, Will," Martha replied softly. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're here to tell your story, and you just need to answer what's asked in your own words. I'll be by your side the whole time." Punctually at 10 o'clock, the bailiff announced the entrance of Judge Monica Thompson. The courtroom, although larger than conventional ones, was completely occupied. On one side, the formidable team from the Allman and Bryant law firm, led by Richard and Camilla with assistants carrying organized folders and electronic devices. On the other, the more modest team gathered around Felicity Oliver, Marina, Raphael, representatives from the district attorney's office, and volunteer specialists. In the front row of the audience, Augustus Torres sat alone, his face marked by sleepless nights and an expression that blended confusion and guilt. Deborah, against the advice of her lawyers, insisted on attending, maintaining her elegant posture and defiant gaze, as if her presence alone could intimidate the witnesses. "We are commencing the hearing regarding the protective measure process in favor of the minor William Mendonca Torres," the judge announced, adjusting her glasses. "I clarify that, as this case involves a child, the doors will remain closed during testimonies with restricted access to the parties and their representatives. The press will be admitted only for the reading of the decision, respecting the minor's right to privacy." The first witness called was Joachim Foster. The old caretaker walked with firm steps to the designated chair, took his oath, and when invited to testify, simply and directly recounted what he had witnessed for months: William's progressive isolation, the deterioration of his physical condition, Deborah's explicit orders to keep him away, the episodes of hunger and neglect. The boy worsened every day. "Your Honor," he concluded, his voice choked. "When it rained, the stable became damp. In the cold, those stone walls felt like a refrigerator, and he was there, thinner, sadder, quieter with each passing day." The Torres defense, in cross-examination, tried to insinuate ulterior motives for the complaint: resentment over unequal treatment, envy of the family's wealth, manipulation by third parties interested in the scandal. Joachim remained firm, responding with the dignity of someone with nothing to hide. "I worked for the Torres family for almost 30 years, Madam Lawyer. I saw Mr. Augustus grow up, marry, build that estate. I was William's godfather. If I wanted to harm someone, I would have had many chances over those years. What moved me was seeing a child suffering and knowing that I would be complicit if I remained silent." Mrs. Josie's testimony was equally forceful, adding details about Deborah's specific instructions to restrict William's food, avoid contact, and not provide clean clothes or other basic care. She said the boy needed discipline, that he was rebellious by nature, the cook reported. "But what I saw was a frightened child, who hid in corners and was grateful for any crumb he got." When questioned about the text messages she had preserved, Mrs. Josie explained, "I started saving them because I was afraid no one would believe me. Such a refined, elegant woman, giving lectures on charity. Who would believe she treated her stepson that way?" The third witness was Dr. Renata Franklin, the pediatrician who first examined William. With the scientific authority of someone who had documented every injury, every indicator of neglect, every physical sign of prolonged suffering, she presented an irrefutable technical report. "What we found was a classic case of severe neglect and continuous exposure to inadequate conditions," she declared, pointing to images projected on the courtroom screen. "Moderate malnutrition, iron deficiency, anemia, respiratory infection, multiple untreated skin lesions, calluses on his feet due to lack of appropriate footwear." The defense tried to suggest that the conditions could have other causes: the child's own self-neglecting behaviors, pre-existing medical conditions, genetic predisposition. The doctor, with the confidence of someone who completely mastered the subject, refuted each attempt. "The clinical findings are unequivocal and interdependent, forming a picture consistent with environmental and nutritional neglect. There is no medical condition that simultaneously explains all the symptoms found, except prolonged exposure to an inadequate environment, insufficient nutrition, and absence of basic care." After a brief lunch break, the hearing resumed with the testimony of psychologist Martha Gomez, who presented the drawings made by William during therapy sessions at the shelter home. The simple but powerful images showed how the child perceived his reality: the dark stable, animals as his only company, his own small and isolated figure, always separated from the main house and adult figures. "These are not drawings of a child who chose to isolate himself," Martha explained. "They are graphic representations of abandonment, fear, and imposed loneliness. The spatial positioning of the elements, the use of dark colors, the disproportion between human figures, everything indicates trauma and a feeling of rejection." Marina Adams was called next, presenting the Specialized Child and Family Services technical report documenting the conditions found on the estate, the contrast between the luxury of the main residence and the neglect of the space where William lived, the behavioral patterns observed during initial interactions with the boy. "What we found was a child institutionalized within his own home," she concluded. "William had developed typical survival strategies in hostile environments, saving food for times of scarcity, moving to avoid being noticed, minimizing his own needs so as not to bother." The most tense moment of the hearing came when Richard Allman announced that he would call Deborah Miller to testify in her own defense. Elegant in a discreet suit, the socialite walked to the chair with the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling social environments. Her initial testimony followed the carefully constructed narrative: the dedicated stepmother, trying to help a problematic stepson after the traumatic loss of his biological mother. She spoke about frustrated attempts at rapprochement, the boy's defiant behaviors, his preference for isolation, consultations with specialists that never resulted in progress. "William chose to distance himself," she declared with apparent regret. I tried to be a mother to him, but from the beginning I was rejected. The stable was his refuge, the place where he felt comfortable. We respected that as a way of processing grief. When Felicity Oliver began cross-examination, however, contradictions began to emerge. Confronted with the text messages sent to Mrs. Josie, with excerpts from the recovered recordings, and with financial statements showing the absence of any expenses related to her stepson, Deborah began to falter. If the boy truly preferred the stable by his own choice, Felicity questioned, why did you need to explicitly order him to be kept there during social events? Why mandate reduced food as a form of discipline? Why prohibit employees from providing clean clothes? The final blow came when Felicity replayed the most incriminating part of the recording. Deborah admitting to friends that she kept William away because he reminded me too much of his mother, because it was better for the family's image, and that Augustus didn't even suspect his son slept in the stable. In the witness stand, Deborah's face hardened. The mask of maternal concern fell completely when she realized there was no honorable exit. You don't understand, she finally said, her voice filled with bitterness. He was never my son. I built a perfect life, an impeccable public image. And that boy, with his accusing eyes just like his mother's, was always there to remind me that I would never be enough for Augustus. A murmur ran through the room. Even the defense lawyers seemed momentarily shocked by the explicit confession. In the public seating area, Augustus Torres bowed his head as if the weight of his own negligence finally hit him completely. The last to be called was William himself. The judge stipulated special conditions for his testimony. Only she, the essential legal representatives, and the accompanying psychologist would remain in the room. The questions would be simplified, respecting the child's capacity for understanding. William entered timidly, holding Martha's hand. Dressed in clean, well-cared-for clothes, with his hair combed and his face fuller than weeks before, he seemed simultaneously healthier and more vulnerable. The judge, abandoning her usual formality, left the bench to sit closer to the boy, creating a less intimidating environment. "Hello, William," she began gently. "Do you know why we are all gathered here today?" "To decide where I'm going to live," he replied in a low but clear voice. "That's right. And for that we need to understand what your life was like before. Can you tell me what it was like living on the estate?" With simple and direct words typical of his age, William described his routine: waking in the stable, sharing space with the horses, finding food when possible, hiding from visitors, avoiding encounters with Deborah so as not to make her nervous. "Aunt Deborah said I messed up the house, that I was ugly, that no one wanted to see me," he explained, without drama or exaggeration, just stating facts as he understood them. "She said Daddy was always busy because of me, that I was too much trouble." "And your father? Did you talk?" "Almost never. He traveled a lot. When he was home, Aunt Deborah said he was tired, that I shouldn't bother him." William hesitated a moment before continuing. "Once I tried to tell him about the stable, but Aunt Deborah said he already knew, that he was the one who told me to stay there because I was a bad boy." The simplicity of the narrative, devoid of any attempt at dramatization, carried a force that no adult testimony could match. When asked how he felt now in the shelter home, the boy responded with equal frankness. "It's good to have a real bed, and food all the time. And no one tells me to leave when visitors come." After William's testimony, the judge asked for a few minutes to organize her notes before announcing the preliminary decision. During the recess, the atmosphere in the room was one of contained tension. The Torres defense team, realizing the direction the case had taken, desperately tried to convince Augustus to accept a settlement. "If we act quickly, we can still control the narrative," Richard Allman insisted. "We take some degree of responsibility, proposing a plan for supervised reunification, family restructuring." Augustus seemed not to hear. His eyes were fixed on the door through which his son had left minutes earlier. The boy he barely recognized, whose suffering he had ignored out of convenience and cowardice. When everyone returned to their seats, Judge Monica Thompson resumed her formal position. Her face, usually neutral, bore visible marks of the contained emotion she felt about the case. "This court has heard substantial and disturbing evidence regarding the situation experienced by the minor William Mendonca Torres," she began. "Based on the facts presented, the technical reports, and the best interest of the child, as provided for in the Child and Adolescent Protection Act, I determined the following. The entire room held its breath as the judge enumerated her decisions. Maintenance of the protective measure of institutional care indefinitely. Suspension of Augustus Torres's parental rights until a complete psychosocial evaluation. Prohibition of any contact between stepmother Deborah and the minor. Referral of the case to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation into severe neglect. Determination that the father undergo family therapy and responsible parenting classes before any consideration of supervised visits. This case, the magistrate concluded, is a painful reminder that high walls and consolidated fortunes can hide silent violence. The duty of this court is, above all, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. While the lawyers on both sides already discussed the next procedural steps, Augustus Torres remained motionless in his seat. Beyond the legal battle that had just begun, he now faced the most severe judgment, that of his own conscience. Outside the courthouse, away from the commotion and cameras, William waited in the official car with Marina and Martha. He did not fully understand the legal implications of what had happened, but he knew with the intuition of children that something fundamental had changed. "Are we going back to the shelter home now?" he asked, holding the silver medallion he never abandoned. "Yes, Will," Marina replied, adjusting the boy's seatbelt. "You'll stay there until we find the best place for you. A place with a real bed," he insisted. "With a real bed, food on the table, and people who truly care about you," the social worker assured. "It's a promise." As the car drove away from the courthouse, William looked out the window at the open sky of Riverside. For the first time in a long time, he didn't need to hide. He didn't need to be afraid. His voice had been heard, his truth recognized. What would come next was still uncertain, but one thing he already knew: he would never again live in the shadows. 3 months had passed since the hearing that had forever changed William's destiny. The stable boy case continued to reverberate in legal and social circles, with developments that went far beyond the personal drama of the Torres family. On a quiet, tree-lined street in the Vista Heights neighborhood of Riverside, a simple but comfortable house now housed a new family configuration. Sitting at the kitchen table, William leaned intently over his notebook, his tongue peeking out the corner of his mouth as he solved math problems. Beside him, Paul Miller, a history professor at the local university, graded his students' papers while occasionally glancing at the boy's progress. "I finished, Uncle Paul," William announced, proudly holding up his notebook. Paul adjusted his glasses and carefully examined the exercises. "Very good, Will. You got almost all of them right. You just need to review this multiplication here. Remember the technique Aunt Teresa taught you." From the backyard came the aroma of baking bread and the melodious voice of Teresa Miller, an art teacher at the same school William now attended. She hummed as she tended the small vegetable garden they had planted together, a project the boy followed with fascination, marveling at the miracle of seeds transforming into food. The Miller foster family had welcomed William 6 weeks after his removal from the estate. The couple, qualified by the municipal foster care program, offered what the technical team considered ideal for the boy's recovery: a stable environment, a predictable routine, educational stimulation, and, above all, genuine affection. "Snack time," Teresa called, entering the kitchen with a basket of freshly picked cherry tomatoes. "Warm bread with butter, and these tomatoes that Will helped me plant. A perfect combination." William dropped his pencil and ran to wash his hands, a ritual he now performed without needing to be reminded, part of the new routine that brought him security. His body had visibly changed in recent months: fuller cheeks, a more upright posture, a livelier gaze. The physical marks of neglect had healed, although the emotional ones would require a longer and more careful process. As they ate, the doorbell rang. Paul went to answer it and returned accompanied by Marina Adams, who was making her weekly follow-up visit. The social worker's face lit up when she saw William. "Look who looks like he just got a perfect score in math," she joked, accepting the piece of bread Teresa offered. "Almost," the boy replied, showing his notebook. "I only missed 2 multiplications." Marina sat with them, keeping the conversation light while professionally observing the family dynamic. These visits, although mandatory within the foster care protocol, had become eagerly awaited moments for everyone, especially William, who saw Marina as the bridge between his difficult past and his new reality. After the snack, while Paul took William to choose a book for bedtime reading, another precious ritual of the new routine, Marina and Teresa talked in low voices in the kitchen. "How has he been sleeping?" the social worker asked. "Better every week," Teresa replied. "The nightmares have decreased a lot. They still happen occasionally, but now he can verbalize his fear, accept comfort, go back to sleep. There's huge progress, and the sessions with Dr. Martha, they are helping a lot." She said William is starting to process the events more adaptively. His drawings have changed. They have more colors, more movement, less isolation. Marina made notes in her folder. William's case, though still ongoing, was already shaping up as a successful example within the protection system. "You are doing incredible work with him." Teresa shook her head, emotional. "Actually, he has transformed us. Paul and I always wanted children, but we couldn't have them biologically. Receiving William, it's hard to explain, but it's as if our home is finally complete." The conversation was interrupted by the animated return of Paul and William, the latter carrying an adventure book like a trophy. "We're reading this one today. It has pirates and a treasure map." After a few more minutes of conversation, Marina said goodbye, promising to return the following week. On her way to the car, she was surprised by William, who ran to catch up with her. "And Marina, I forgot to ask, are Mr. Joachim and Mrs. Josie visiting me on Sunday?" "Yes, Will," they confirmed. "And I think they're bringing that cornbread cake you like so much." The boy smiled, satisfied. The regular visits from the former caretaker and former cook, the two people who had risked everything to protect him, were highlights in his new life. Joachim, now employed as a maintenance supervisor in a residential complex, a job he found with the help of the solidarity network formed around the case, and Mrs. Josie, hired as a cook at a private school, represented important links of emotional continuity. As Marina drove back to the office, she reflected on the multiple developments of the case. William's situation had dramatically improved, but this was only part of a larger story, with ramifications that continued to unfold. In the legal sphere, the criminal proceedings against Deborah Miller continued. The former socialite, once a celebrated figure in social columns, faced charges of child abuse, abandonment of a minor, and psychological abuse. Her charity foundation had been suspended after an audit revealed financial irregularities. Invitations to social events dried up. The doors of high society quietly closed. The veneer of respectability that had cost so much effort to maintain had completely dissolved. Augustus Torres, for his part, was undergoing a contradictory process of redemption. After the initial shock and denial, the businessman seemed to finally awaken to the extent of his complicity by omission. He sold the estate where the abuses had occurred, gradually distanced himself from Deborah, divorce proceedings were already underway, and began intensive therapy. In addition to regularly participating in a program for parents rebuilding bonds, his relationship with William was in the first and delicate steps of reconstruction. Supervised visits, initially tense and uncomfortable, slowly began to find new channels of communication. The boy, protected by the safe environment of the foster family and psychological support, could now express his hurt and disappointment, while Augustus learned, with difficulty, to listen and take responsibility without justifications. "Daddy, why didn't you ever see that I was in the stable?" William had asked during one of these visits, the question that weighed most heavily on his heart. Augustus, advised to respond with age-appropriate honesty, admitted with a choked voice, "Because I chose not to see, son. I was too busy with things much less important than you. It was wrong, it was unforgivable, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to fix it." Marina parked in front of the Specialized Child and Family Services office, where an expanded team meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. The Torres case, beyond the individual drama, had become a catalyst for systematic changes in the region's child protection network. Felicity Oliver, the lawyer who had led the defense of William's rights, waited at the entrance, accompanied by representatives from the district attorney's office, the Family Services Agency, and non-governmental organizations for child protection. "Important meeting today," Felicity commented upon seeing Marina. We're finalizing the integrated protocol for identifying and responding to cases of neglect in high-income families. The William Protocol, as it was informally called, represented a significant advance in how the system approached situations of abuse in privileged contexts. Traditionally, child protection focused on low-income families, where socioeconomic vulnerability was more visible. The Torres case had exposed how high walls and consolidated fortunes could hide equally devastating violence, protected by layers of social and economic influence. The new protocol established specific guidelines for sensitive investigation into indicators of neglect in environments of apparent privilege, specialized training for network professionals, more accessible and protected reporting channels, and strategies to confront political and media pressures in cases involving powerful families. In the meeting room, Raphael Carter, the child protection officer who had followed the case from the beginning, presented data compiled in recent months. After the repercussions of the Torres case, we recorded a 47% increase in complaints involving middle and high-income families. These are situations that have always existed, but remained invisible due to social pressure and the fear of retaliation from whistleblowers. Journalist Louisa Martin, whose investigative report had been crucial in changing the public narrative about the case, also participated in the meeting. Her work had earned her not only journalism awards, but a new project, a series of special reports on different facets of violence against children and adolescents, highlighting the importance of the protection network and the signs that should not be ignored. The meeting progressed through the afternoon, discussing technical details of the protocol, adjustments to the service flow and training strategies. For Marina, this work represented the broader dimension of her vocation. In addition to intervening in individual cases, contributing to structural changes that could prevent future suffering. When the meeting ended, dusk was falling over Riverside. Marina drove back home with the satisfaction of someone who, despite the enormous difficulties of the system, could glimpse concrete progress. Her phone rang. It was Martha, the psychologist who treated William. "Marina, sorry to call at this hour, but I wanted to share something incredible. Remember I asked William to draw how he sees himself in the future? Of course, part of the projective work you mentioned. I just received the drawing he made at school today. Well, you need to see it. I'm sending the photo now." Marina parked to check the incoming image. The drawing showed a colorful house with a flowering garden and a tree laden with fruit. In the center, 3 figures holding hands, 2 larger ones labeled Uncle Paul and Aunt Teresa, and a smaller one in the middle identified as me. Beside them, a slightly distant figure, but connected by a dotted line, identified as my dad. In the intense blue sky, a figure among clouds with improvised wings, labeled Mommy Watching Me. In the bottom corner, separated from the main group but smiling, were Mr. Joachim and Mrs. Josie. What impressed Marina most, however, was the phrase written in large, colorful letters at the top of the page, "My happy future." "Amazing, isn't it?" Martha commented on the other end of the line. The capacity for reframing, the integration of different reference figures, the positive future perspective even after everything he's been through. "He's an extraordinary boy," Marina replied, emotional. "With adequate support, he'll go very far." That same night, in a parallel universe a few miles away, Paul Miller carefully closed the bedroom door after finishing the reading ritual with William. The boy had fallen asleep halfway through the pirate story, holding the silver medallion he never abandoned. In the living room, Teresa organized materials for her next day's class. She smiled as she saw her husband approach. "Asleep?" she asked in a low voice. "Like an angel." In the middle of the most exciting part of the treasure hunt. They sat together on the sofa, enjoying the comfortable silence of the house. 3 months ago, they were just a couple. Now, a family in the making. The adaptation had not been easy. William carried the weight of deep traumas, irrational fears, defensive behaviors learned in a hostile environment. There were nights of crying, moments of regression, episodes of testing limits to verify if the affection offered was truly unconditional. But there were also the first spontaneous laughs, the growing trust, the small daily victories, the first time he asked for help without fear, the first nightmare from which he woke seeking comfort instead of hiding. The first time he called the new house our home instead of your home. The social worker mentioned today that the process is progressing well, Paul commented, intertwining his fingers with his wife's. If everything continues like this, in a few months we can start the formal adoption process. Teresa squeezed his hand, emotional. Do you think he'll want to? Officially, I mean. Yesterday, when we were choosing the book, he asked me if he could call me Dad someday, Paul revealed, his voice choked. I told him he could call me whatever he felt comfortable with, that the important thing was what we felt for each other, not the name we used. Teresa's eyes filled with tears. And what did he say? That he would think about it, and that he really liked living with us because here he could be a real kid. The silence that followed was filled with all the words that didn't need to be said. Gratitude for the opportunity to raise that extraordinary boy, the commitment to offer him the safe and loving environment he deserved, the awareness that despite all the difficulties still to come, they were on the right path. A few yards away, in his room decorated in shades of blue, a color he himself had chosen, William slept soundly. His mother's silver medallion rested on his chest, no longer as the sole link to lost affection, but as part of a story that now included new characters and possibilities. On the table beside the bed, the drawing he had made at school showed his version of the future. Colorful, connected, protected. 2 months later, at a small ceremony at the municipal school where he studied, William presented his project for the science fair. Unlike the baking soda volcanoes or styrofoam solar systems that dominated the other tables, his work consisted of a series of 3 painted canvases, arranged in sequence. The first showed a dark stable, with a small figure huddled in a corner, surrounded by shadows. The second depicted hands, many hands of different sizes and shades, reaching out towards the figure, now a little larger as in a gesture of rescue. The third and final canvas presented an explosion of colors. A child with open arms under a blue sky, surrounded by protective adult figures and symbols of possibilities, books, art, growing plants. My project is called The Path to Light, William explained to the evaluating teacher, with a confidence that would have been unthinkable months earlier. It's about how we can help children living in the dark find a path to the light. Next to the exhibition, a small text explained how different professionals, social workers, child protection officers, doctors, psychologists, lawyers, formed a protection network for vulnerable children. The project also included a list of warning signs that should not be ignored and safe channels for reporting. In the audience, Paul and Teresa watched with discreet pride. Beside them, Marina, Raphael, Joachim, Mrs. Josie, and even Augustus Torres, the latter still in his complex process of reconciliation with his son and himself, formed an improbable constellation of support. When the presentation ended, to warm applause, the school principal approached with an envelope in her hands. William, your project has been selected to represent our school at the Regional Science Showcase, she announced. The committee was especially impressed with the social relevance of the theme and the artistic way you approached it. The boy received the news with a radiant smile that lit up his entire face. It wasn't just the academic recognition that moved him, but the nascent awareness that his personal story, re-signified through art and knowledge, could help other children also find their path to the light. That night, during the celebratory dinner at the Miller's home, now officially in the process of adopting William, the boy made an unexpected request. Can I invite some children from the New Dawn shelter home to come here to our house on the weekend? To play and have a snack? Paul and Teresa exchanged surprised and emotional glances. Of course you can, Will, Teresa replied. That's a wonderful idea. Any special reason? William thought for a moment before answering, distractedly stirring his food with a fork. It's just that, when I was there, I always imagined what it would be like to have a real home, with a backyard and everything. Now that I have one, I wanted them to be able to feel that too, at least a little bit. The profound simplicity of those words summarized the transformation that no statistics or technical report could fully capture. More than a success story in the protection system, more than a legal precedent, more than an institutional protocol, William's story represented the fundamental possibility of reconstruction, living proof that a stolen childhood could be, step by step, given back. Under the safe roof of that simple house, with warm food on the table, Books on the shelves, colors on the walls, and constant affection. The boy who had once been forced to live among horses now grew in dignity and possibilities. His mother's silver medallion remained always close, no longer as the sole refuge of affection, but as part of a larger story that now included new chapters, new characters, and finally, the certainty that no one else would decide he should live in the dark. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope William's journey has deeply touched your hearts. To follow more stories that explore human resilience and the capacity for overcoming adversity, we have prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking the link on the left side of the screen. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring exclusive stories that reveal the complexity of life and the transformative power of solidarity. Share in the comments which moment of this story touched you the most, and if you know of real cases where the Child Protection Network made a difference. Until next time.